"Hey, Weo, does your hover stool work over mud?" I asked from the door to the cockpit. "Not deep mud," Weo said, glancing at me with her tentacles at work on the controls. "The sensors feel for solid ground." "Dang," I sighed. "Guess I'm stuck with cleaning the exosuit after this delivery." "Yeah, sorry," she said. "There are fresh batteries for the gravity wands, at least. Shouldn't take you too long." G stalked past me, his many bug feet clicking in what was probably irritation. He didn't say anything, and neither did I, at least until he was out of earshot in the direction of the cargo bay. I whispered to Weo, "And at least I only have 2 legs to clean." "Good point," she agreed. "Best of luck." I thanked her and headed off after G to where the exosuits waited. He had a head start in getting his on, which he needed. I tried not to draw attention to how easily I tugged mine on over my regular clothes, minus the shoes. G didn't even take the opportunity to make fun of my need for footwear. He seemed determined to get this delivery over with as quickly as possible. He said, "Be sure to hold on to the hover sled so you don't fall and slow us down." "Sure thing," I agreed. I'd planned to keep a solid grip anyway. Hopefully this mud wasn't the foot-sucking kind. The ship landed gently, or rather arrived. There was no landing pad close enough to our client's location, at least none above the mud at this time of year, so Weo held the ship just above the surface on stable thrusters. The ramp nearly touched the mud. Captain Sunlight had come in to see us off, and she stood to the side as we hustled down the ramp. "Be quick but careful," she told us. G replied, "That's the plan." I freed a hand to wave, then grabbed the edge of our most reliable hover sled. I would have liked to ride on it next to the cases of medical supplies. Low priority, not urgent, thankfully. But that wouldn't have been fair to G. So I did my share of pushing and stepped cautiously into the mud. Whew, I thought. More watery than thick. I can walk in this. And it was cold, but the exosuit did a decent job of insulating for temperature. I took in the sights more confidently, appreciating the fuzzy moss on all the trees and the intricate shapes that the bushes grew in. It didn't quite look like an earth swamp, but it didn't look hostile, and that was all I could ask for, really. Behind us, the ship closed the bay door and lifted up to a more comfortable height to wait. G, with a better view of the screen on the front of the sled, pointed with a pincher arm. We changed direction slightly and trudged through the mud. The depth changed a few times in quick succession, going from ankle deep to above the knee and back. I did my best to maintain a careful speed, though it was tricky since I couldn't see the bottom. G seemed to be doing fine. I held on to the sled and took long strides, feeling the way with one foot before trusting my weight to it. Thicker lumps and rocks lurked along the uneven ground. I focused on stepping between them without losing my balance, trusting G to keep us on track. "Scenic," I commented to break the monotony of silence and my own breathing inside the helmet. "Wet," G replied. "Scenic and wet." I glanced up at the mossy trees, then back down at the watery mud. Muddy water? Somewhere in between. Not the easiest place to walk, though. "The captain could have chosen Blip and Blop for this delivery," G griped. But no, they're busy helping Eggskin prepare some complicated food. "And paint wouldn't be up for this temperature," I said as I stepped into deeper water that chilled me to my thighs. Or this depth, really. Paint misses out on a lot of unpleasant environments. Lucky. I looked over at him across the pile of strapped-down cases, only because she'd pass out and die if she got too cold. I don't know if I'd call that lucky. G tapped an antenna against the inside of his helmet. Bah! Today, she's lucky to be cold-blooded. We're stuck with this instead. I mentally ran down the roster of our other crewmates. Some of them, like Weo, had other jobs to be doing. I suppose Mur wouldn't have an easy time in something this deep either. I didn't even know if he could swim. Looking like a squid didn't necessarily translate. "No one is likely to have an easy time in this," G said, shaking a foreleg and splattering watery mud across a tree trunk. "I can't imagine why the client chose to live here." "Maybe they like mud," I said, trying to watch my feet even though I couldn't see them. "They are welcome to it. I look forward to getting back to the ship." I was in agreement about that. The info summary about this location had said it was the wet season. Really? Shocking. And that the regular roadways were unavailable. I was under the impression that there was a town somewhere nearby, or at least other people than just the one, but all I could see was endless swamp, with rocks and the occasional tree root just waiting to trip me. I focused on stepping carefully and trying not to slow our progress. Concentrating as I was, I didn't realize we'd arrived until G tugged the sled to the side. I looked up to find the first dry ground I'd seen rising out of the mud into a walkway of flat paving stones. A round stone house perched at the top of the rise. We slogged up to leave an interesting set of footprints along the walkway. My left-right muddy boot prints and G's collection of much smaller splats. With the hover sled between us, it looked like this house was getting two visitors interested in staying as far away from each other as possible, instead of a single delivery. When we got close, a chorus of tiny squeaks started up. I located the source, a small cage hanging beside the door, which held a handful of cricket-sized whatevers. While G found what passed for a doorbell, I took a surreptitious look. They were small and blobby, not mini near cousins of his, which was definitely for the best. "Delivery!" G announced while a chime jangled. Various bumps and a muffled voice sounded from inside. Then our avian client opened the door eagerly. "Thank you for coming," he said in the same trade language we were using, just with the distinct quackety overtones of his particular species. His dark feathers were flecked with white, and he kept his arms folded as if they were wings. He said earnestly, "I hope it wasn't too long of a walk." "It was fine," G said. "Would you like your packages unloaded right here?" "Oh, The ducky fellow looked indecisively between the stack of boxes, the paving stones, and the indoors. I said, "We could carry them in for you, but we'd track in a bit of mud." The sled was much too wide to fit through the door. "That's all right, I'll move them," he decided. "Out here is fine. Now where should I—" "Yes, thank you." He took the payment screen from G and signed for the delivery while I undid the straps holding everything down. We didn't always bother with those, but I was starting to think we should. If I'd managed to trip and knock a box into the mud, that would have been an embarrassing bad mark on our record. While we unloaded the boxes, those little whatsits serenaded us with a fresh chorus of squeaky chirps. It reminded me of tame finches with just a touch of guinea pig. I wondered if this was the local version of a wind chime or something else. The client saw me staring and said, "My dear little Cozy went missing, and these are his favorite food. I'm hoping to lure him back. You haven't seen him, have you? A young cuddle beast about this big with a white stripe on his head." He held clawed hands a few inches apart. "Sorry, no," I said with a look at G. "I didn't see any beasts at all." "Did you?" "No," G agreed. "Just mud." The client ruffled his feathers in a way I didn't know how to read. Maybe he was embarrassed. They did tell me he's suited to living in this environment, and he might not return if I let him out. But I haven't given up hope. My home is nice and warm after all. "We'll keep an eye out on the walk back," I told him. "Does he come when he's called?" "He always did when he was inside the house," the guy said. "Cozy! Cozy!" He waited for a moment, then looked down. He loves his cuddles. "I hope nothing bad has happened to him." G set down the last box. "You've done what you can," he assured the client, sounding like he might have even meant it. "I suppose so." The ducky guy looked sad for a moment, then rallied. "Well, thank you again. I don't want to keep you. Safe travels!" We bid him goodbye and headed back down into the mud, with me waving goodbye and G trying to make good time. The client went back into his house and I focused on taking long strides again. We went slightly to the side of the route we'd taken before. The mud was much lumpier here, with herds of round rocks that rolled around and made the footing treacherous. Despite my death grip on the sled, I was nearly swimming at a couple points in an effort to keep up. The muddy water was deep enough to swim in, but not consistently so. Otherwise, I might have given up and started paddling. I had just decided to ask G to slow down when I lost my footing completely and went under, holding my breath in panic before I remembered the exosuit covered my head. I got my feet under me by kicking lumps out of the way, and I stood in the waist-high mud, wiping futilely at the dirty face mask. G sighed audibly and stopped walking. "Really? It's hard to find somewhere solid to step," I exclaimed. "There are rocks and lumps of mud everywhere." I scooped one up to prove my point, ending up with what looked like a potato. "Huh, that's too light to be a rock." "Tuber?" "Fascinating," G said dryly. "It reminds me of an earth food, but those don't grow in swamps," I said, giving it a closer look. "Do not bring it back to the ship for eating," G said sternly. "I wasn't going to," I protested. "Good. It's probably horribly smelly and liable to poison half the crew." I started to protest more, just on principle. Then the potato opened an eye and I dropped it. "Ah! What?" "It's a creature." I shuffled in place, feeling more potato-like shapes bump against my ankles in the cold, watery mud. Are these all animals? Ugh, G declared, lifting a couple exo-suited legs out of the murk on his side of the hover sled. What an unpleasant choice of environmental niches. I was thinking fast. Wait, these could be like toads. It's cold right now. Maybe they're hibernating. Hey, do you know what a cuddle beast actually looks like? Not a clue. That's your area of expertise. G gave me a look through the domes over his faceted eyes. Do these things look especially cuddleable to you? I don't know, maybe. I felt around gingerly for another one, hoping they didn't have sharp teeth to use on people who interrupted their hibernation. But that would explain why Cozy never came back, if he's out here dozing with his distant family. Well, I'm sure he's very happy if so, G said, stepping forward. Let's be off. Wait, let me try something first. I put a hand on the sled as it eased past, but did my best impression of the squeaks that the food animals had made earlier. Cute little questioning sounds like they were curious. If that didn't work close to the house, it's unlikely to work out here, G said. But he stopped again. It's worth a shot, I said. Cozy. Cozy! Then I squeaked some more. What a surprise, nothing. Now let's... G flinched when something by his hind leg croaked. Cozy, I said with a grin, ducking to look under the hover sled. Here, boy. Something potato-like with big eyes and a distinct pale swatch on the top was treading water in the murk. G stepped fastidiously to higher ground. I can't believe you found it. Yup, I said, testing my footing. Now I just have to catch it. As long as you keep your mud to yourself. No promises, I said, making the first lunge of many and only splashing a little.